In 1850, an American farm family could survive an entire winter on skills most people today could not figure out in a month. They made their own soap from ashes and bacon grease, kept butter fresh in a creek, and predicted tomorrow's weather by watching their cows lie down. Today, if the power flickers for 3 hours, we call it an emergency. But here is the twist. Number 14 on this list kept meat safe for 2 years without refrigeration, and USDA still cannot fully replicate the chemistry. Number 3, engineers recently discovered it cools food better than a modern refrigerator using nothing but a hole in the ground. These 30 skills were so common, your great-grandparents learned them before they turned 10. Before we start, hit that subscribe button because what you are about to learn might actually save your life one day. Let's count down. Number 30, root cellar food storage. Before refrigerators hummed in every American kitchen, the root cellar was the pantry, the freezer, and the grocery store all in one. Dug 6 to 8 feet beneath the farmhouse or built into a hillside, these earthen rooms stayed between 32 and 40 degrees year-round without a single watt of electricity. A family in 1890 in Iowa could store 300 pounds of potatoes, 100 pounds of carrots buried in damp sand, crates of apples wrapped in newspaper, and dozens of jars of preserves for under $5 in construction costs. The trick was ventilation. An intake pipe near the floor and an exhaust pipe near the ceiling created natural convection that kept humidity around 90%. Apples stored properly kept until May. Today we pay thousands for walk-in refrigerators that do the same job, but worse. Number 29th, smokehouse meat preservation. Every farmstead from Virginia to Missouri had a small wooden smokehouse standing a few dozen feet from the main house. After hog killing in November, when the first hard frost had passed, families salt-cured hams and bacon for 6 weeks, then hung them in the smokehouse over a slow, smoldering fire of hickory or applewood. The process took 10 to 14 days of careful tending, keeping the temperature under 100 degrees, so the meat cured without cooking. A properly smoked ham would hang safely in that shed for 2 full years. The smoke coated the meat in phenols that killed bacteria, while adding that deep mahogany flavor no grocery store ham comes close to matching. Number 28, churning butter by hand. Every morning on the American farm, someone, usually a child, sat beside a wooden dash churn and pumped the plunger up and down for 30 to 45 minutes until the cream separated. That rhythmic thump, thump, thump was the rhythm of breakfast in rural America well into the 1930s. Fresh cream from the morning milking went into the churn at 60 degrees, the sweet spot where butterfat globules could clump without turning greasy. Grandmother added a pinch of salt, rinsed the butter in cold spring water to wash out the buttermilk, then pressed it into carved wooden molds. A pound of butter cost about 35 cents in 1925, but homemade butter cost 4 cents and it tasted nothing alike. Number 27, making lei soap from wood ashes. Wood ash soap was taught to every farm girl before she turned 12. The process started with an ash hopper, a V-shaped wooden trough packed with hardwood ashes from the winter fires. Rainwater was slowly poured through, and what dripped out the bottom was potassium lye, strong enough to dissolve a chicken feather in 60 seconds. That lye was combined with rendered bacon grease or tallow, heated over a fire, and stirred for hours until it saponified. A single batch cost nothing but time and produced 40 pounds of soap that lasted a family an entire year. Modern dermatologists have recently rediscovered that real lye soap preserves skin oils better than commercial detergent bars full of synthetic surfactants. Number 26. Candle dipping by the fire. Before kerosene lamps took over in the 1870s, every American home made candles from tallow, the hard white fat rendered from beef or sheep. On candle-making day, usually in autumn after fall butchering, the whole family worked together. Wicks of braided cotton string were tied to wooden dowels, dipped into melted tallow, then hung to cool. Each dip added a thin layer, so a single candle required 20 to 30 passes. The tallow had to stay at exactly 160 degrees. Too hot, and the layers melted off. Too cool, and they cracked. A family of 8 needed about 200 candles a year, and everyone was earned one slow dip at a time. Number 25. Mason jar canning. When John Landis Mason patented his screw-top jar in 1858, he quietly revolutionized how America ate. By 1900, nearly every American kitchen had shelves lined with glass jars of tomatoes, green beans, peaches, and blackberry jam. Jars were sterilized in boiling water for 10 minutes, filled while hot, sealed with rubber rings and zinc lids, then processed in a pressure canner at 10 pounds for the required time. Low-acid foods needed 240 degrees to kill botulism spores. In 1930, a woman in Kansas might put up 800 jars in a summer, enough to feed her family through a brutal winter. The satisfying ping of a lid sealing was the sound of food security itself. Number 24. Sourdough starter, a living, heirloom leavening culture. Every pioneer heading west carried something more valuable than gold in her wagon, a jar of sourdough starter. This living culture of wild yeast and lactobacillus bacteria, fed daily with flour and water, could raise bread without a single packet of commercial yeast, which did not even exist commercially in America until 1868. Alaskan gold miners kept their starters alive through 50 below zero winters by sleeping with them. A good starter, properly maintained, could last 100 years and be passed down through generations like a family heirloom. The bacteria pre-digested the gluten, making the bread easier to digest. Today, bakers pay $50 for starters descended from pioneer originals. Number 23. Salt curing meat. Before refrigeration, salt was the most valuable kitchen ingredient in America. A pound of salt cost about a nickel in 1880, but it could preserve 20 pounds of pork for a year. The ratio was critical. 1 pound of salt for every 10 pounds of meat. The salt was rubbed thoroughly into every surface, and the meat was packed into wooden barrels with saltpeter to keep the color pink. After 6 weeks in the brine, the meat was ready to hang or store. The salt drew moisture out of the meat and out of any bacteria that tried to grow, dehydrating them to death. A Kentucky farmer in 1905 could walk into his smokehouse in July, cut a slice off a ham he had cured in December, and eat it safely. Number 22. Darning and mending clothes, pattern break. Here is something that will shock modern shoppers. During the Great Depression, throwing away a sock with a hole in it was unthinkable. American women kept a darning egg, a smooth wooden egg carved specifically for the task, alongside their sewing basket. The egg slipped inside the sock to stretch the hole taut, and they wove new threads across the gap in a tight over and under pattern that restored the fabric. A well-darned sock could last another full year. Shirts had their collars turned inside out when the outside wore through, giving them a second life. A child in 1935 rural America might wear the same pair of pants through 3 siblings, patched and repatched until the original fabric was barely visible. The average American now throws away 81 pounds of clothing per year. Number 21. Scrap quilting. Nothing in the American farmhouse was thrown away, and the scrap quilt was the ultimate proof. Every worn-out dress, every outgrown pair of overalls, every flour sack that had been boiled clean was cut into 3-inch squares and saved in a cloth bag under the bed. When the bag filled, usually after a year or two, the women of the household gathered for a quilting bee. Using only the discards of daily life, they stitched together blankets that could last a century. A single quilt contained pieces of 30 different garments, each square a memory. These quilts are now displayed in the Smithsonian, valued at $10,000 each. Your great-grandmother made them for free. Number 20. Rain barrel water collection. Every American farm had wooden barrels placed under the downspouts of the house and barn roofs. 1 inch of rain on a 1,000 square foot roof yields 600 gallons of water. A 50-gallon oak barrel cost about $1 in 1890. Rainwater was prized because it was soft. It lathered soap better than any well water, saved wear on kettles, and made laundry day easier. Women washed their hair in rainwater because it left hair shinier. Gardens watered with rainwater grew noticeably better than those watered with hard well water, because rainwater contains dissolved nitrogen and no lime. Many municipalities now charge families for their own rainfall. In 1920, collecting your own water was not a hobby. It was common sense. Number 19. Ice harvesting from frozen ponds. In January and February across New England and the Midwest, when ponds froze solid to 18 inches thick, entire communities mobilized for the ice harvest. Men with horse-drawn ice plows scored the frozen surface into a grid, then cut out blocks weighing up to 300 pounds with long-toothed saws. The blocks were loaded onto sleds, hauled to insulated ice houses, and packed in sawdust, where they would keep until the following December. A family's ice house held about 2 tons of ice and cost nothing to fill except labor. That same ice chilled milk in the spring house, made ice cream at the 4th of July picnic, and kept meat fresh through the summer. By 1900, the American ice industry employed 90,000 people. Number 18, pickling with salt brine. Before Americans bought pickles in jars at the grocery store, every kitchen had a stoneware crock of cucumbers fermenting in salt brine. Fresh cucumbers, grape leaves for crispness, fresh dill, garlic cloves, and a brine of 3 tablespoons of salt per quart of water. The crock sat in the cellar for 3 to 4 weeks, while lactobacillus bacteria, naturally present on the vegetables, fermented the sugars into lactic acid. The result was a pickle packed with probiotics that modern scientists now recognize as essential to gut health. Cabbage became sauerkraut by the same process. Beets, green tomatoes, and even watermelon rinds all got pickled. A single 5-gallon crock fed a family fermented vegetables all winter. Number 17. Drying herbs on strings. Every summer, American farm kitchens were festooned with drying herbs hanging from rafters and string lines. Sage, thyme, mint, oregano, and dozens of wild herbs were harvested in the morning after the dew evaporated, tied in small bundles, and hung upside down in the attic or on the shady side of the porch. After 2 weeks, the leaves were dry enough to crumble into glass jars that lasted until the next summer. The reason for hanging upside down was clever chemistry. The essential oils concentrated in the leaves rather than draining into the stems. A grandmother in 1920 Appalachia might maintain 60 different dried herbs. We now pay $3 for a tiny jar of what they grew for free. Number 16. Rendering lard from hog fat. After the fall hog killing, every pound of fat was precious. Rendering lard took an entire day. The hardback fat and softer leaf fat around the kidneys were cut into 1-inch cubes and melted slowly in large iron kettles over a low fire. Grandmother stirred constantly, keeping the temperature under 250 degrees so the lard stayed white and flavorless rather than brown and smoky. After 4 hours, the clear liquid fat was strained through cheesecloth into crocks, where it solidified into snow-white lard that kept for a full year in a cool pantry. The crispy bits left behind, called cracklings, were the cook's reward. Pie crusts made with real lard are flakier than any butter version. Number 15. Making jerky on wooden racks. Long before vacuum-sealed gas station jerky, American hunters and settlers preserved meat by slicing it thin against the grain and drying it slowly in the sun or over a low fire. A whole deer could be turned into 10 pounds of shelf-stable jerky that would last 2 years in a dry tin. The meat was first rubbed with salt and black pepper, sometimes with maple syrup or sorghum molasses, then laid on wooden racks raised high enough that dogs could not steal it. The drying took 36 to 48 hours in warm, dry weather. Union soldiers carried jerky through the Civil War. A pound of fresh venison became 4 ounces of something that fit in a pocket and fed a man for 3 days. Number 14. Hand-pumped well water. Second pattern break. Here is what modern plumbing made us forget. Every American farm before 1940 had a hand pump connected to a well, 30 to 100 feet deep. The cast iron pumps cost $6 in 1910, and they lasted 50 years with basic maintenance. The engineering was elegant. A leather washer on a piston created suction that pulled water up the pipe, one stroke at a time. A household needed 40 gallons a day, meaning roughly 400 strokes split between morning and evening. Children were sent to the pump as one of their earliest chores. The water came up at a constant 54 degrees year-round, cold enough in August to refresh, and it never froze in February if the pump was drained at night. Here is the wild part. Researchers at Cornell studied well water from farms still using hand pumps in 2019. The mineral profile actually supported immune function better than treated municipal tap water. A $6 pump outperformed systems that cost cities millions to maintain. Number 13. Splitting firewood with iron wedges. A cord of firewood, 4 feet deep by 4 feet high by 8 feet long, would heat an American farmhouse for 6 weeks of winter. To get that cord ready for the stove, wood had to be split, and every farmer kept a set of iron wedges and a splitting maul for the hardest logs. Technique was everything. Read the grain, find the natural cracks, place the wedge perpendicular to the end grain, strike with the maul until the wedge bites in, then drive a second wedge behind it. A skilled man could split a full cord in 3 hours. Oak and hickory gave the hottest fire. Ash split cleanest. Elm was the enemy of every woodcutter because its twisted grain refused to separate. Number 12. Homemade apple cider vinegar. Every American orchard family made vinegar from the seconds the apples too bruised or misshapen to sell. The apples were pressed for cider in October, and the sweet cider was left in oak barrels, with the bungs loose. Wild yeast fermented the sugar into alcohol over 6 weeks. Then, Acetobacter bacteria, naturally floating in the air, converted the alcohol into acetic acid over another 6 to 8 weeks. The result was 5% acid apple cider vinegar that kept indefinitely in a cool cellar. A gallon cost pennies to make and served countless purposes: salad dressing, meat marinade, hair rinse, cold remedy, wound cleaner. Modern research confirms it has antimicrobial properties that commercial white vinegar lacks. Supermarket vinegar is sterile. Grandma's was alive. Number 11. Flint and steel fire starting. Before matches became common in American homes in the 1860s, every household kept a tinderbox containing a piece of flint, a steel striker, and a nest of charred cloth or dried fungus. The technique took practice, but it worked in any weather. Strike the flint against the steel at a sharp angle to shower sparks onto the tinder. Blow gently on the smoldering ember to coax it into flame, then transfer it to kindling. A skilled frontierswoman could have a cooking fire going in 90 seconds. The char cloth was homemade by burning strips of cotton in a tin with a pinhole, creating a black fabric that caught sparks better than anything. Pioneers sometimes carried coals from the previous fire in a tin can to save the effort. Number 10. Snare trapping for small game. When deer were scarce and winter was long, American settlers trusted snares and deadfall traps to fill the stew pot. A brass wire snare set on a well-worn rabbit trail could yield 3 rabbits a week for the price of 2 cents of wire. The trick was reading signs. Droppings, tracks, and nibbled bark told an experienced eye exactly where to set the loop at the height of a rabbit's head. A deadfall trap used a rock balanced on a figure-4 trigger to drop onto whatever nudged the bait. A boy in Wisconsin in 1890 could run a trap line of 20 snares before school and bring home dinner. The skill required 0 ammunition, which mattered when a box of shells cost a day's wages. Number 9. Tanning hides with animal brains. Third pattern break. Now the gross one scientists recently rediscovered. Every Native American and frontier family knew this truth. Every animal has exactly enough brain tissue to tan its own hide. The chemistry is remarkable. The lecithin and phospholipids in brain matter emulsify with water to penetrate the collagen fibers of a hide, leaving the leather soft and pliable where salt alone would leave it stiff. The process took 3 days. Scrape the hide clean, soak it in a slurry of mashed brains and water. Work it constantly as it dried, pulling and stretching to keep the fibers flexible. The result was buckskin, softer than any modern factory leather, breathable, and durable enough to last decades. This is what modern tanners pay for. Chemical alternatives that duplicate the exact action of brain matter sell for $80 a gallon. The brain was free. Industrial tanning uses chromium salts that pollute rivers worldwide, and brain tanning produces zero waste. A single pair of authentic brain-tanned moccasins now sells for $600. Number 8. Spinning wool into yarn. Before the Industrial Revolution put textile mills in New England, every American farm with sheep also had a spinning wheel. Turning 1 pound of raw fleece into usable yarn took 4 hours of steady work. The wool was first washed to remove lanolin, then carded with paddle-shaped wire brushes to align the fibers. From there, the spinner drafted out a thin ribbon of fiber and fed it into the spinning wheel's flyer, where it twisted into yarn as the foot pedal drove the wheel. A woman in 1810 Massachusetts spun about 2 pounds of yarn a week, enough for socks, mittens, and perhaps a shawl over the course of a year. Homespun cloth clothed the entire American Revolution because British imports had been boycotted. The skill was patriotic resistance. Number 7. Foraging wild edibles. Every American grandmother knew 30 plants by sight that most of us would walk past today. Ramps in April, morel mushrooms in May, wild asparagus and fiddlehead ferns along creek banks, blackberries in July, pawpaws and persimmons in September, walnuts and hickory nuts in October. This knowledge was passed mother to daughter for generations, and it turned woodlands into a walking grocery store. A family could harvest 200 pounds of wild food a year for free. The skill required knowing lookalikes cold. Water hemlock looks like wild parsnip, and it will kill you in an hour. Destroying angel mushrooms hide among edible ones. But anyone who learned the signs could feed themselves when the pantry ran low. Foraging guides now sell for $30. Every great-grandmother had it memorized. Number 6. Home birth and midwifery. Until 1940, more than half of all American babies were born at home, delivered by a neighborhood midwife who had learned her craft from the midwife before her. A good midwife knew how to check fetal position through the belly, catch a baby safely, tie and cut the cord with clean string and scissors dipped in whiskey, and recognize the warning signs that meant fetching a doctor. She cost $2 and stayed for 3 days afterward, cooking meals and looking after the other children while the mother rested. Maternal mortality in births attended by midwives was actually lower than in early hospital births, where unwashed doctors spread infection. The midwife knew every woman in the county. It was personalized medicine at its finest. Number 5. Reading weather by nature's signs. No weather app, no satellite, no radar, just observation. American farmers and sailors predicted weather 24 hours out, with remarkable accuracy, using signs their grandfathers had taught them. Cows lying down meant rain within 12 hours because the animals sensed falling barometric pressure. Swallows flying low, pushed down by humid, heavy air, meant storms were coming. A red sky at morning warned of approaching weather systems. Pine cones closing up signaled rising humidity. The ring around the moon predicted rain within 3 days. These were not superstitions. They were observations, refined over generations. Modern meteorologists now use these same biological indicators to verify their computer models. Your great-grandfather's weather report was about 85% accurate without a single piece of equipment. Number 4. Herbal medicine and healing poultices. Every American farmhouse had a medicine shelf of herbs, not pills. Willow bark tea for headaches, which contains the same salicylic acid as aspirin. Yarrow leaves for stopping bleeding, used on the battlefield at Gettysburg. Plantain leaves for bee stings and splinters, drawing infection out overnight. Golden seal for sore throats. Comfrey poultices for broken bones, strong enough that its country name was knitbone. A mustard plaster on the chest for congestion. Honey and onion syrup for coughs. A good herbalist grandmother could treat 90% of what walked into her kitchen with a stomachache, cut, or a cold. Patent medicine companies spent millions in the early 1900s advertising us into forgetting this knowledge. Today, the pharmaceutical industry spends billions researching the exact compounds those old women extracted with water and patience. Number 3, springhouse refrigeration. This is the fourth pattern break, the one engineers cannot stop marveling at. Long before electric refrigerators, American farms used springhouses to keep food cold. A springhouse was a small stone building constructed directly over a cold-flowing spring or brook. The water, entering the earth miles away, arrived at a constant 50 degrees year-round. Inside the springhouse, shallow stone troughs channeled the water past crocks of milk, butter, eggs, and cheese. The flowing water continuously pulled heat from the containers while the thick stone walls provided insulation. Here is what shocks modern engineers. The springhouse maintained a steadier temperature than most modern refrigerators, which cycle between 34 and 42 degrees. Milk kept for a week. Butter stayed firm in July. Cheese aged perfectly. The entire system required zero electricity, zero moving parts, and zero maintenance, other than cleaning the troughs twice a year. A 2018 engineering study concluded that the springhouse design is more energy efficient than any current refrigeration technology. Your great-great-grandfather engineered better than we do. Number 2, building log cabins with mortise and tenon. The American log cabin was raised without a single nail. The technique came from Scandinavian settlers and spread across the continent with the westward migration. Each log was notched at the corners in a saddle or dovetail joint that interlocked with its neighbor, pulling tighter as the wood shrunk. Interior timbers were joined with mortise and tenon, one piece carved with a rectangular hole, the other with a matching peg, held together with a wooden dowel called a tree nail. A family with one adze, one broad axe, and one draw knife could build a 20 by 30-foot cabin in 6 weeks. The finished structure flexed in wind instead of cracking, breathed moisture through the logs, and lasted 200 years with basic maintenance. Several of these cabins still stand in Appalachia, still lived in. Number 1, seed saving and the family corn crib. The most important American survival skill, the one that sat at the root of every farm, was seed saving. Every fall, the best ears of corn, the plumpest tomatoes, the strongest bean plants were marked and set aside. Their seeds were dried on screens, stored in paper envelopes or glass jars, and labeled with the year and variety. A family growing their own food saved seed from 30 or 40 different plants each year. This was more than frugality, it was evolution. Seeds saved from plants that thrived in your specific soil, your specific climate, your specific insect pressure became genetically adapted to your farm over decades. Grandmother's heirloom tomatoes grew better on her land than any hybrid from a seed catalog. The corn crib, a slatted wooden building that dried seed corn all winter, stood as the beating heart of American food sovereignty. When large seed companies patented hybrid varieties that could not reproduce true, and when farmers signed contracts forbidding seed saving, something essential was lost. Today, the Svalbard Global Seed Vault holds 1 million seed samples because modern agriculture forgot what every American farm wife used to know. The seed she saved in 1920 carried 100 years of her family's survival inside it. So there you have it, 30 American survival skills that kept this country fed, clothed, warm, and alive for 300 years. Some of them are already coming back. People are fermenting again, canning again, saving seeds again. Maybe it is because we sense that the skills that built this country might be worth remembering. Try one this week, just one. Start a sourdough starter, try some herbs. Tell me in the comments which skill you are going to bring back. Your great-grandmother knew, now you know too.